Welcome to Canada AM. It is Friday. It is the 14th day of
already?
September.
Indeed it is.
Already. Half the month's already over. How many days in September? 30 days has September. 30 days. It's almost half over.
Lucky thing that's at the top of the rhyme.
Yeah. I'm Norm Perry.
Good morning. I'm Pamela Wallen here with Sandy Ronaldo and Wally Mott.
We are going to be talking about how to complain this morning. Apparently, Canadians are very timid. We are very timid creatures indeed. If something bothers us about a product we've purchased or a service we've asked for, we don't do very much about it. Apparently, only 1 in 10 Canadians will follow through with something they're unhappy about. Well, there's a new book out called The Art of Complaining. Everything you have to know, ranging all the way up to the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, about how you can protect yourself when you're dealing with someone who has not lived up to satisfaction.
Also on the program this morning, we're going to take a look at those finishing touches that Brian Mulroney, the Prime Minister-elect, is putting on his cabinet. Some people inside are saying that he may make as many as 40 appointments. It will be a dramatically larger cabinet than that of John Turner. Meanwhile, of course, the Liberals are trying to figure out what they will do with their new status. Only 40 members in the House of Commons, a lot more money, or a lot less money to deal with, and a few problems with just not enough bodies around, I guess, to make that system work in Parliament Hill. We're going to be taking a look at what's going on in Ottawa this week and, of course, the setup for the events to take place on Monday. Also, we'll be taking a look throughout the program this morning at some of the activities of Pope John Paul II. Here's Wally now with the weather.
Thanks, Pamela. Good morning, everyone. We have fall temperatures across the country today. As you can see on our map, the highs won't go much above 18 in some areas, warming up a little bit from the west coast, 20 in Victoria and Vancouver today. The sky conditions will be quite varied. They'll range from cloudy skies in some areas and rain in some areas, quite heavy rain in southern Ontario yesterday. Right now, we'll be right back in a minute.
The CTV National News with Lloyd Robertson. From policymakers who shape our future to troublemakers who tear it apart. From hate and war to triumph and peace. Always on the front line of history, the CTV National News, the trust and tradition continues. Canadians are witnessing an historic event as His Holiness Pope John Paul II tours our nation. From coast to coast, CTV News is following the Pontiff's journey with live specials and daily reports on Canada AM and the CTV National News. Tonight, join CTV News live from Toronto's Exhibition Stadium as Pope John Paul II meets with the Polish people of Canada. It's high-flying adventure each week with CTV's Magnum PI, where danger, beauty, and trouble in paradise are all in a day's work. Then, Lee Horsley is Matt Houston, a detective with panache and Texas know-how. Come on and join the celebration. The royal visit of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II and the Duke of Edinburgh to Canada. Join CTV News for comprehensive coast-to-coast coverage of this fall's royal event. Expert reporting headed by Lloyd Robertson, along with Pamela Wallen, Bob Evans, and Peter Murphy. Witness all the pageantry and excitement as the royal tour travels through our nation. The Royal Visit on CTV, beginning September 24th.
Good morning, everyone. Time now for the news. Our top story. Team Canada defeated the Soviet Union in Canada Cup play last night in Calgary. It was sweet revenge for the Canadians, who were humiliated 8-1 in the last Canada Cup. With the details of the game, here's Wally.
And what an exciting game it was, Sandy. The best one by far in this series. John Tonelli put Canada in front 1-0 early in the second period. In the third, the Russians scored 2 quick goals to go ahead. Then at the 16-minute mark, Canada tied it up, Doug Wilson scoring the goal. Then in overtime, it was tremendous hockey with Paul Coffey making the play of the game. Here is what it was like in Calgary last night.
Out come the Soviets on a 2-on-1. Only Coffey is back. they come. To the line. Coffey dropped it off. Here's Tonelli moving in. Tonelli to the boards. Around behind the net for Sutter. Sutter clears it out in front. Went off a leg. Now Tonelli doing all that work again, and he takes two players down with him. Back out to the blue line. Coffey takes the shot. Turns with it. Fires it in there. Deflects over top of the net. Tonelli after that puck. Tonelli ducks the check. Back on the blue line. Here's another shot.
What a win, what a game. The Canadians now meet the Swedes in the best-of-3 final. Back to you, Sandy.
Thank you, Wally. The Papal tour arrives in Toronto today as the Pope reaches the halfway point of his 12-day visit. The Pope is leaving Halifax after a swing through eastern Canada that took him to Newfoundland and New Brunswick as well as Nova Scotia. Yesterday, the Pope paid tribute to the Acadian people during a stop in Moncton. Then later, he moved on to Halifax and another warm welcome. Richard Perry reports.
Despite the long day, Pope John Paul appeared anything but tired when he arrived in Nova Scotia. With a musical welcome from a Polish choir, there were cordial handshakes for local dignitaries, but the Pope was most interested in the Micmac Indians who came to greet him, spending more time with them than anyone else. And then what the Pope loves best, to mingle with crowds and to greet children. From the airport, the motorcade passed through a small fishing village, then over the harbor into Halifax. Thousands turned out for a youth rally where the pontiff challenged the young to keep faith.
Our families are threatened by divorce, pornography, alcohol, and drug abuse. You, who are young and full of enthusiasm, have a special part to play.
The message was similar at St. Mary's Basilica, the Pope saying people of all ages have a role to play in the church. With the number of priests and nuns declining in recent years, he said lay people are needed desperately.
If you are a helper, help as though every action was done at God's orders.
The Pope will spend 18 hours in Nova Scotia before heading to Toronto. It's just about the halfway point of his Canadian tour, a tour Maritime organizers say is going perfectly. Richard Perry, CTV News, Halifax.
The new Conservative cabinet will be sworn in on Monday, but Prime Minister-elect Brian Mulroney may have his new cabinet's lineup completed today. The Toronto Globe and Mail says the Tory cabinet could have as many as 40 ministers. Pierre Trudeau had 37 ministers in his last government. Mulroney is also reported to be considering the formation of a new forestry ministry. Hurricane Diana is running out of gas. She has now officially been downgraded to a tropical storm. Yesterday, Diana ravaged much of the Carolina coast, causing light to moderate property damage in the Wilmington-Myrtle Beach area. No deaths or serious injuries have been directly attributed to the storm. Even though Diana has lost much of her strength, authorities are worried that she could still cause severe flooding in rural parts of North and South Carolina. Divers are getting ready to recover more than 30 drums of radioactive material from a sunken French freighter in the North Sea. The ship, the Mont Louis, went down 2 weeks ago off the coast of Belgium after colliding with a ferry. Yesterday, salvage crews managed to recover one of the containers. Each one holds 12 tons of highly toxic radioactive hexafluoride. Shimon Peres, appealing for peace with Arabs, was sworn in today as Israel's 8th prime minister, ending 7 weeks of political deadlock. A compromise solution was finally reached yesterday when Labor leader Peres and former Prime Minister Yitzhak Shamir of the right-wing Likud bloc signed a coalition pact. Martin Himmel reports.
The signed agreement has inaugurated an unprecedented Israeli government. Peres and Shamir, two seasoned political rivals, have agreed to rotate the premiership, with Peres serving the first 2 years. The cabinet, 25 ministers in all, encompass the political left and right in Israel. Defense Minister Yitzhak Rabin advocates a troop withdrawal within 6 months from Lebanon. He also supports giving up West Bank territory to Jordan in return for a peace treaty. Ariel Sharon, the former defense minister who initiated Israel's invasion into Lebanon, is now a consumer affairs minister. He will oppose Rabin's policy by attempting to expand West Bank Jewish settlements in order to keep the region under Israeli control. But the real fight will be to stabilize the economy. Peres believes the coalition agreement will contribute towards beating Israel's 400% inflation rate.
Jointly, we can answer the call of our people by far better than by going ahead each against the other.
Still, the foundation of this government is rooted with deep ideological disputes between Peres and Shamir's camps, a situation that could cripple the cabinet. The hope here is that this government of national unity will improve the economy and pull Israel's soldiers out of Lebanon. But there are fears that the cabinet could turn out to be a government of national paralysis, endlessly debating its own policies without producing results. Martin Himmel, CTV News at the Israeli Parliament in Jerusalem.
Aside from the unscheduled rain at many of the papal tour stops, the Pope's visit has been going pretty much as planned. Yesterday, though, there was an impromptu stop in St. John's, Newfoundland. John Paul stopped at the city's harbor to talk with the crew of a Polish schooner that had taken part in the tall ship's visit. The crew had defied the Polish government by stopping in St. John's to see the pontiff. We have that story from Peter Murphy.
The Gdynia, a twin-masted Polish schooner, had been in St. John's Harbor for 3 days now. The bearded captain, his 13-man Polish crew, and 3 North Americans were hoping that somehow they could meet the Pope. Just before the Pope was scheduled to leave St. John's, a heavily built security man arrived at the dockside and told the captain the Pope was coming to visit. The Poles could hardly believe it. They quickly lined up on the street outside the harbor and waited. By the time the papal motorcade arrived, a small crowd had gathered. The Pope's limousine stopped in front of the sailors, and they rushed to greet him. The Pope stayed inside the car. The Gdynia's crew crowded around the back door. John Paul met and talked with each crew member. They shook his hand and kissed his ring. It was a short visit. It ended with a brief wave of the Pope's hand. And then the Polish crew were left standing in the street, stunned and overcome with emotion. The captain of the Gdynia had defied orders of the Polish consul in Toronto, who had told him not to go to St. John's to try to meet the Pope. The captain was happy he came.
I'm very happy that John Paul and Newfoundlander help us some, that we met John Paul and John Paul too give us some seconds his life too and talk with my crew.
After the Pope left, the crew of the Gdynia worked feverishly, readying the schooner for the long 3-week sail home to Gdansk. They planned to leave early in the morning, confident now that with the Pope's blessing, their journey home will be a safe one. Peter Murphy, CTV News, St. John's.
And that is our newscast. Here's Wally.
Thank you, Sandy. Let's take a look at the weather picture across the country. We have sunshine moving in from the west coast today, and that's moving across Alberta and into Saskatchewan. Sunny with cloudy periods, the forecast in that region. In Manitoba, still quite cloudy today, as in northern Ontario. In the south today, sunny with cloudy periods, the forecast. There could be a few clouds and showers in Quebec today, and in the far north around Labrador, perhaps the odd snow flurry. It'll be mainly cloudy with rain in the Maritimes. As we take a look at the sky conditions across the country, you can see just exactly what the temperatures are doing. They are cooling off as well with all that cloud and shower activity. But in the west, in Vancouver, 20 is the forecast high today, the same in Victoria. Calgary will hit a high of 18, much the same in Edmonton. Saskatoon region, Regina, and Winnipeg, about 14. In Toronto, it'll go up to 20 today, sunny with cloudy periods, the forecast. Montreal, much the same, sunny with cloudy periods, but further to the north, there'll be more cloud and perhaps the odd shower. St. John's, Newfoundland, and the Maritime provinces will be cloudy today, temperatures around the 14 to 18 mark. That's a look at the weather picture. Norm?
Canadians tend to be a very timid bunch when it comes to complaining about shoddy goods or services. Consumer advocate Phil Edmonston says only 1 in 10 of us will stand up for our rights. He has a new book out called The Art of Complaining, which suggests the proper way to get satisfaction or your money back. Good morning, Phil.
Morning.
Why are we so timid about complaining?
I think we're afraid of rocking the boat, afraid of people laughing at us or being set apart from the general crowd. It's It just seems to be un-Canadian to complain.
All right. If you decide you want to be the strong type and get satisfaction, what you do? What's the right way to complain?
Well, first of all, you should try to make sure that you have something to complain about. And generally, there's a visceral feeling that you're being ripped off. You know something is wrong. It's just not right. And then you try to, at a low level, you try to confirm your feelings by someone who's at the retail establishment or someone who is at a low level in government who can tell you, yes, well, that is policy or that is not policy and you should appeal it or what have you. Then if you find that they're still not listening to you once you go higher up, you're going to have to, at that time, send off what we call a registered letter. Now, why wouldn't you use a telephone instead?
Yeah, a lot faster.
Problem with telephones is that it's tough nowadays to get to people who are policy makers, not policy implementers. Those people who implement policy. Those are the representatives of the company many times who will tell you 100 creative ways. No.
Okay, so whom do you send the registered letter to?
Generally, you send it to the director of the zone, the president of the company, or director of retail sales.
And what do you say in that letter?
Well, what you generally say is you're polite. And you say, I'm unhappy with this particular product. And there's two important points, though. One is you've got to say what you want out of the company. And secondly, you've got to give them a number of days to act. You've got to create your own time frame so that you're not waiting forever for some sort of response.
Let's say you send that registered letter, you do it all the right way you suggest, and still nothing happens. What do you do then?
Then you take a copy of that registered letter and you take it down to the local small claims court. Now, all of our provinces have small claims courts. And what you do then is that by depositing it with a clerk, you don't need a lawyer, you don't need to spend a great deal of money, anything between $10, $15, $20, $25. And you give it to the clerk of the small claims court, and that produces another letter. But this is a letter by a third party saying you are being sued for this amount of money, and in about 5 weeks or 2 months you should be at the court on this date. That really picks up the momentum, whether it's a manufacturer or whether it's a professional, a lawyer or whomever. They're going to listen. At this time they're going to assess, is this case worth my time in court? And we have many courthouse settlements right on the steps of the courthouse where they say, no, let's send that person their check right away.
Is it the same process if you're dealing with a professional, say a doctor or a lawyer, as you're assisting for, say, a retailer?
It's tougher. I can find a retailer, I can find a garage for you, or someone who will testify to the fact that that vehicle was badly manufactured or it was badly repaired. It's tough as heck to get a lawyer or a doctor to testify against another one.
Which is what you need, of course.
Yes, and if you don't have that, generally our lawyers say, don't waste your time because it's very tough to make your proof.
What about something like a government agency or governments?
It's a different tactic. In writing a book, I had to deal with how we have dealt with the government many times, and we find that many times you have to use the political intervener. You have to use an MP. You have to apply political pressure to these bureaucrats in order to make them listen or even wake them up. I don't mean they're all sleeping, but you've got to sensitize them to your problem, and usually it's a political solution.
And I guess the main thing is to realize we have a right as Canadians to complain about poor service and poor quality products,
We
right?
sure do, yes.
Phil, thanks for talking with us.
Thank you.
Phil Edmonston, his new book, The Art of Complaining. Back in just a moment with Wally and a complete sports report for you.
The CTV National News with Lloyd Robertson. From policymakers who shape our future to troublemakers who tear it apart. From hate and war to triumph and peace. Always on the front line of history, the CTV National News, the trust and tradition continues. The 1984 Canada Cup on CTV. World-class hockey at its best, from the opening face-off to the final goal. Outstanding ice play, and CTV is there to bring you all the action live. Join CTV Sunday for the first final game in great international hockey action. Canada Cup 84.
Come on, it's time to join the celebration with CTV.
CTV's Monday movie, the joys, the fears, and the tears. It's another season of great features. Our celebration of motion pictures continues on CTV's Academy Performance with outstanding comedy and drama. CTV's commitment to the best means great entertainment for you. So come on, everybody. Join the celebration on CTV.
Stay on top of a great sport with This Week in Football. I'm Peter Young, and to make the statistics and events of each action-packed CFL game more concise to handle, join me for This Week in Football. Not only will we keep you up to date on the events of the 1984 season, we'll also take a step back into sports history with Johnny Esau's Yesterday in the CFL. So whether you're a football fan trying to update your season-long scoreboard or just getting the highlights of the games you've missed, you'll find no better avenue than This Week in Football here on CTV.
The Red Cross, apparently, is going to assume a new role. They're going to get more directly involved in helping to solve armed conflicts. Not all members of the Red Cross think that's a good idea. We'll take a look at that story later this morning.
There's talk of a leadership review by some Liberals in the province of Quebec. Meanwhile, Brian Mulroney is busy putting the final touches on his cabinet, expected to be larger than any other in history. Here's Wally.
Thanks, Pamela. As mentioned earlier, as we take a look at sports, Canada defeated the Soviet Union 3-2 in overtime last night to move into the final against Sweden. Let's take a look at the winning goal in overtime. John Tonelli, voted Canada's player of the game, keeps digging along the boards and gets it out to Paul Coffey. He drills it at the net, and Mike Bossy, standing at the side of the net, tips it with the stick, and it catches the corner. The game is over. A dramatic finish to an excellent hockey game. Paul Coffey, who moments before broke up a 2-on-1 rush, takes the shot, a Bossy deflection, and Canada moves to the final. We'll have more on the game later on Canada AM. Turning to baseball, the Toronto Blue Jays fell 11 games behind the Detroit Tigers, losing to the Yankees last night 6-1. The Tigers can clinch the American East with a sweep over the Jays this weekend. Elsewhere, it was California over Cleveland by a score of 7-3, Texas down Seattle 9-7. In the National League, Montreal at Chicago was postponed, but the New York Mets lost. They were hammered by the Pittsburgh Pirates 14-4. Philadelphia, meanwhile, defeated St. Louis 10-2. In golf, Frank Edmonds of Thunder Bay, Ontario, has the lead in the Canadian Professional Golf Association Championship at Stouffville, Ontario. Dave Barr, Greg Olson, and Stephen Anderson Chapman are tied for second, one shot behind at 4 under par. At the Greater Milwaukee Open, Woody Blackburn has the lead with 8 under, and at the LPGA, Marta Figueres-Dotti and Muffin Spencer Devlin share the lead with 66s. That's the sports to the moment. Sandy?
Thank you, Norm. In business news, the American dollar remained on its record-breaking binge yesterday, the U.S. dollar soaring in Europe, closing at a 13-year high against the West German mark and at record rates against the French and Italian currencies. So this morning in London, although our currency should be down, it is doing relatively well against the American dollar, trading at 75.98 cents American. The U.S. dollar, as I said, is still very strong. Gold is also up this morning, fixed at $339.40 American after dropping 25 cents yesterday. Silver, meanwhile, is down slightly this morning, trading for $7.14 U.S. As we take a look at the stock markets, a strong buying binge swept the stock markets, catching traders by surprise. In New York, the market recorded its biggest gain in a month, up 27.94 points. Price levels also soared in Toronto as an estimated $2.9 billion was added to the value of shares of Canadian companies. The TSE 300 Composite Index closing up almost 39 points. And the Bank of Canada rate, fixed Wednesday afternoon because of the papal visit, stands at 12.39%. There is another battle brewing in Washington that has the Canadian steel industry pitted against the Americans. U.S. lobbyists were in Washington yesterday pressing for foreign steel import restrictions. President Reagan's answer is expected Tuesday. Here's Craig Oliver.
They were from the 6 steel-making states, once the proud industrial heartland of America, in Washington pleading for help.
We're part of America, and we're a very viable part of America, and we're hurting right now. And we need the rest of America to help us.
The smokeless stacks of closed steel plants, deserted cities which hundreds of thousands of jobless have fled, are all that remain of a way of life across America's Iron Range. Early next week, President Reagan is expected to decide whether to take action to curb cheap imported foreign steel. Canadian industry experts say import restrictions could cost thousands of jobs in Canadian steel plants. but senior U.S. officials are hinting that Canada would not be included. And the lobbyists agree that Canada should not be a target.
Canada is certainly a unique situation with the United States, and that exemption is something that I'm sure we can live with because Canada has been fair with us, and I think we're just trying to get along with them. We're not talking about the Canadians. We're talking about the countries of Japan, Korea, Mexico, Brazil.
Senior U.S. officials say the Reagan administration is anxious to launch a new, friendlier, more cooperative era in U.S.-Canadian relations with the new Conservative government of Brian Mulroney. And that's why they confirm Canada will be exempted from whatever action the White House takes against foreign imported steel. Craig Oliver, CTV News, Washington.
That is our business calendar this Friday. Here is Norm.
And we'll be back in just a moment with the Canada AM calendar.
Friday Night Football on CTV. This week, Calgary's McMahon Stadium is the place as the Stampeders take to the home field to tackle the Ottawa Roughriders. It's going to be great CFL action, and CTV will be there on the sidelines to bring you all the excitement of the encounter. Join us for expert commentary and analysis. Catch all the action of Friday Night Football on CTV this week. Local blackouts in effect.
Jonathan is a real honest-to-goodness angel on a highway to heaven. Michael Landon has the task of spreading goodwill and harmony. Then, harmony and goodwill don't always go hand in hand in a big city hotel. But intrigue and drama sure do. And this exciting series is back. Come on and join the celebration on CTV.
Come on, it's time to join the celebration with CTV. Come on, everybody! Join the celebration!
Come on, everybody, join the celebration!
Join the celebration!
Come join the celebration! Woo!
Come on, it's time to join the celebration with CTV.
There's always adventure and intrigue with Scarecrow and Mrs. King. Two unbelievable secret agents meeting national and international crime head-on. Then, All That's Gold is in Glitter, the country's most exciting and revealing magazine that exposes the truths behind the personalities of America. So come on and join the celebration.
Pope John Paul II is in Halifax to start off the 6th day of his cross-Canada tour. He pays a visit to a hospital this morning, delivers Mass at the Central Commons, and then he boards a plane for Toronto. This afternoon, he attends a ceremonial lighting of the Peace Flame in front of the City Hall in Toronto and takes part in an ecumenical prayer service at St. Paul's Cathedral. That's considered one of the most symbolic of the Pope's events today. And this evening, he heads for Exhibition Stadium to attend a Polish rally. And CTV News will have special coverage of that for you later on this evening.
The Vatican Secretary of State is also in Toronto. Agostino Cardinal Caroli is delivering a speech to the Empire Club, a speech on the role of the papacy in the modern world.
In Grand Bank, Newfoundland, Provincial Fisheries Minister James Morgan is on trial, charged, ironically enough, with illegal salmon fishing. Fisheries officers allege that Morgan was attempting to catch salmon on August 3rd using illegal angling gear. The minister pleaded not guilty, and he denies he did anything wrong. A lot of people will be watching that case.
Remember we had Jeffrey Archer on the program last week? He's got a new book out about Parliament in Britain, and there's a fascinating chapter there about the struggle to get a seat in cabinet. I couldn't help but think what's going on at this moment in Ottawa with all those people to choose from, and I guess we'll probably have, what, the largest cabinet ever in this country?
I think so, yeah. Pierre Trudeau had about 37 people at the height of his cabinet. It grew over his time in office. Brian Mulroney, I think, will probably have a larger cabinet than that. A lot of those positions will be ministers of state, which are really junior cabinet portfolios. But it is a way to bring a lot of new people in and maybe give them some training for a cabinet shuffle a couple of years down the road.
Coming up at the top of the hour, this is Canada AM on CTV.
This is the CTV Television Network. ATV puts Atlantic Canada first.
Good morning. This is Canada AM. It's Friday, and it's the 14th day of September. I'm Pamela Wallen.
Good morning. I'm Norm Perry. John Paul II has been described as more Pole than Pope. His support for the Solidarity movement, his very strong conservative opinions, his attitude towards the liberal contemporary issues of today apparently have their roots in Poland, where he grew up, where he worked for so many years. This morning we're going to talk with two Polish priests about how the Pope's years in Poland may have affected this papacy.
Also, there were some statements made yesterday by Pope John Paul II on the need for the members of the Christian faith to come together. We'll find out if that means there is a new opening in the ecumenical movement in this country. We'll talk with several people from other faiths today who will be attending a special ceremony in Toronto this afternoon. Also, we'll be taking a look at that new cabinet that's being put together piece by Prime Minister-elect Brian Mulroney, and also find out what's going on inside Liberal ranks. Apparently, there's talk already of a leadership review coming from some people who lost their seats in the province of Quebec. Here's Wally now with a look at the weather.
Thank you, Pamela. Good morning, everyone. The weather picture across the country is varied this morning. Quite a bit of cloud, but we do have some sunshine moving in from the west. British Columbia will be mainly sunny today, and some of that sunshine will be moving into Alberta and Saskatchewan later on. Still cloudy in Manitoba, Ontario, and into Quebec. Sunny with cloudy periods in southern Ontario today. The Maritimes will be mostly cloudy with a little bit of drizzle here and there, much the same as in Newfoundland. But look at those temperatures. They're down across the country. 12 is the forecast high in Yellowknife, and look at over in Baker Lake. It is only +2. That's a forecast high, so it's cooling off. Of course, it's nearing the end of September. But those are the sky conditions. Quite a bit of cloud, some sun coming through, and there won't be quite as much rain as there was yesterday. More on the weather later. Right now, the news. Here's Sandy Ronaldo.
Thank you, Wally. Good morning, everyone. The Pope's schedule today begins in Halifax and ends in Toronto. This morning, the Pope is visiting a hospital for sick children in Halifax. John Paul has made it a point to visit with children at his stops on this Canadian tour. And as with all the Pope's events so far, crowds are lining the streets along the route, and security people are in evidence everywhere. Security considerations have been a constant preoccupation during this papal tour. The latest cause for concern is a handwritten note now in the hands of Edmonton police, which implies an attempt will be made to shoot the Pope or others attending the papal mass next Monday. Mark Sigstrom has the details.
The note delivered to the Edmonton Journal is the second threatening letter sent to the newspaper this week. Both are signed by a person or group calling themselves Void, victims of injustice done. The first letter wanted the newspaper to print some documents and run a story about a man in police custody whose name is not being released. When the Journal ignored the demands, it received a second letter, this one containing references to guns and stating, "We will see you at Mass in the stadium, and if we miss the Pope, we will pick off anyone at random." Though the notes could be the work of a crank, Edmonton police are not taking any chances, especially in light of the bombing that occurred in Montreal's train station.
Can't just laugh off a threat or treat them as a joke or a hoax because they might not be. So we have to treat them as seriously until such time as we can prove that they're not serious.
As many as 300,000 people are expected to attend the papal mass near Edmonton on Monday. Police recognize it will be impossible to search everyone for weapons, but the crowd will be kept under constant surveillance, and the Pope will not be walking among the people. In the meantime, police hope to apprehend the person or persons responsible for sending the threatening letters. Mark Sigstrom, CTV News, Edmonton.
The BC legislature has ordered striking transit workers back to work in Vancouver and Victoria. Buses in both cities have been idled for 13 weeks now. We have that story from Del Archer.
British Columbia's legislature began its special session at mid-morning, and with minimum preamble, the government introduced its bill to end the public transportation dispute. It orders 2,700 bus drivers and maintenance workers in Vancouver and Victoria to be back on the job within 72 hours, in other words, by Sunday night. It prohibits management from locking out its employees. The return to work will be based on the old contract, and a mediator has been ordered to work with the two sides to negotiate a new contract. The government warns it will impose its own settlement if those negotiations fail. Bitter union leaders have called the membership to a Saturday meeting to decide if the legislation will be obeyed.
You know, the cynical thing about this whole business is that the government now has to create legislation ordering its own company back to work.
During the 3-month transit shutdown, thumbing became a way of life for Vancouver and Victoria people. Thousands more laced on comfortable shoes and walked to their jobs. More bicycles competed with more cars for space on the roadways, and more bicyclists than usual ended up in hospital. Rush hours had become a nightmare and were growing worse. By early next week, all of this may be history. Del Archer, CTV News, Vancouver.
A powerful earthquake rumbled across a wide area of central Japan today. The quake, which registered 6.9 on the Richter scale, shook buildings in Tokyo and triggered a series of landslides that left at least one person dead. More on that story from Gordon Josseloff.
It was the strongest quake to hit the central Japan region known as the Japanese Alps in more than 80 years. The mountain village of Otaki, population 2,300, was hardest hit. Landslides crushing homes and cutting highways and sending rivers overflowing their banks. The quake, measuring 6.9 on the Richter scale, was felt throughout central Japan. An Otaki school teacher said he had just begun classes when the tremor hit, breaking windows and causing doors to open and shut. The school's 191 pupils, who like all Japanese youngsters undergo periodic earthquake drills, took cover under desks until the shaking stopped. Many village residents sought safety in open areas, and there rode out more than 200 aftershocks in the next 4 hours. The quake struck 13 days after Japan staged its annual Disaster Day drill, marking the anniversary of the great earthquake that leveled Tokyo in 1923, killing 140,000 people. Scientists say the region is overdue for another killer quake. Gordon Josseloff, CBS News, Tokyo.
In the Philippines, the Mayon volcano continues to erupt for the 6th straight day. More than 17,000 people have been forced to flee their homes. The volcano is spewing lava, fire, and ash, which has filled the skies over nearby towns. Overnight, the volcano shook with 26 explosions. Back in 1814, the volcano killed 1,200 people in its worst recorded eruption. The new Conservative cabinet will be sworn in on Monday, but Prime Minister-elect Brian Mulroney may have his new cabinet's lineup completed today. The Globe and Mail says the Tory cabinet could have as many as 40 ministers. Mulroney is also reported to be considering creating a new forestry ministry. Prime Minister John Turner held a farewell party on Parliament Hill yesterday to bid defeat to the rather defeated Liberal MPs, to say goodbye to them. It probably more closely resembled a wake. Fewer than half showed up, said one MP as he entered, quote, "This must be where the losers are." But Turner was relentlessly upbeat, urging them all to stay with the Liberal cause and help rebuild the party.
Memberships at our universities, our Canadian universities have just opened, is phenomenal.
Since the election?
Since the election. So this is, for young people, it's a great time to join.
That is the news, and now here is Wally with today's big sports story, Canada's win over the Soviets in Canada Cup hockey.
Big story is right, Sandy. A 3-2 overtime win for Canada over the Soviet Union. Let's take a look at that winning goal once again. At 12:29 in overtime, John Tonelli, voted Canada's player of the game, just keeps on digging along the boards and gets it out to Paul Coffey. He drills it at the net. Mike Bossy tips it with a stick, and it catches the corner, and the game is over. A dramatic finish to an excellent hockey game. Wayne Gretzky calls it the greatest win he has ever been involved in, adding, "I think I'm even happier than when we won the Stanley Cup." John Tonelli, who of course assisted on Bossy's goal and had a marker himself, says there's no question that Coffey made the play of the game. Coffey also praised Tonelli, Canada's player of the game, saying he just never stops working. Bossy says he was lucky because he didn't even see the shot, adding the puck just happened to hit his stick. He also says it's the most dramatic goal that he has ever scored in his life. Let's turn to baseball and take a look at the scores. In the American League, it was New York over Toronto by a score of 6-1. The Jays are 11 games behind Detroit now, and they'll play the Tigers over the weekend. California over Cleveland 7-3. Texas down Seattle 9-7. In the National League, Montreal at Chicago postponed. Pittsburgh dumped New York 14-4, and Philadelphia defeated St. Louis 10-2. That's our scoreboard. Pamela?
Thanks very much, Wally. 9:30 past the hour. This has been a crucial week for Brian Mulroney. He's had a lot of big decisions to make. From the size of his new cabinet to the shape that his new government will take, even the details of who will run his own office, the Prime Minister's office. Meanwhile, the Liberals have been busy bidding each other farewell and making plans for new lives, many of them say inside the private sector. To take a look at all the events of this week and what we can expect come Monday morning, Hugh Windsor, the Ottawa Bureau Chief of the Globe and Mail, and in our Montreal studios, Elian McDonald, political columnist for the Montreal Gazette. Good morning to you both.
Morning. Good morning.
Hugh Windsor, we'll start with you on the size of the cabinet. Do you think we'll really go to 40 and have the biggest cabinet in history?
I don't think that Mr. Mulroney wants to start with the biggest cabinet, but he also has the largest caucus in history, and therefore he feels that there is some justification for that. Actually, there's no logic in that, because running the government requires a certain amount of energy and direction, and whether you've got another 209 people behind you there or not doesn't make much difference. But clearly, he is going in the opposite direction from Mr. Turner, and he is going to keep all of the little frills and bangs and whistles